Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, experts are raising alarms about this government's plan to distribute a COVID vaccine. We don't have the freezer capacity. We've signed deals that mean other nations, like the United States, will receive millions of doses before a single Canadian does. When can Canadians expect to see a real plan for COVID vaccine distribution from this government?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that the best way to get through this COVID crisis is by vaccines, and that's why we've been working since the summer on signing deals with a record number of companies around the world to ensure that wherever or however someone gets the right vaccine, it will be available in Canada. We're actually positioned better than just about any other country in the world in terms of access to a robust portfolio of vaccines because we took the leadership as a government and got it done. We are also ensuring that we're going to be able to distribute those vaccines as they become available across Canada, and Canadians can count on us.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said they've signed a record number of deals. The Minister told committee they've signed freezer contracts, but she won't say who got the contracts or how much. Maybe Frank Baylis makes freezers, Mr. Speaker. Officials said that Public Health Agency would be responsible for the logistics of handling and distributing the vaccine, but we can't get a clear answer on that either. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to reveal key information to Canadians who need to know about the availability and distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the number one question I get from Canadians these days, and actually over the past 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, has been, when is this all going to be over? How much longer are we going to have to go through this? That's what Canadians want to know. And of course, now that we see that there are vaccines on the horizon, people are very excited about it. And what I can tell you is we're in for a number more months of needing to do the right things before these vaccines start landing anywhere around the world. And that's why we are working very hard to make sure that Canadians get those vaccines the right way and properly. We are working very hard on a range of different vaccine delivery methods, and we will be there to support Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after obfuscation, after prorogation, the number one question I get when I travel around Canada is, when will this Prime Minister finally answer a question and be transparent with Canadians, Mr. Speaker? The distribution, he said, would be by the military. The government distribution story keeps changing. Perhaps they've hired a storyteller, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Public Services also said that she's waiting on Health Canada approval for any vaccine. Pfizer applied for emergency approvals in the United States. We know that Health Canada delays on rapid tests led to problems. Will the Prime Minister commit today to rapid vaccine approval?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell you when I speak with Canadians from coast to coast to coast, they're not asking me about QP, they're asking me about COVID. And that is continuing to be what we are working on as our entire focus. And every step of the way, whether it has been on stepping up on PPE, whether it has been stepping up on testing and indeed rapid testing that we have delivered to the provinces, that the provinces are now evaluating how they want to deploy it. We have been there to deliver all these things that Canadians need, and we will be there to deliver on vaccines just like we've had their back in every other way during this pandemic.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Chelsea Craig is the President of the Liberal Party of Canada in Quebec. Recently, Ms. Craig said that Bill 101 was an oppressive act. After its adoption, the Liberals continue to not respect Bill 101. Why are Liberal leaders hindering the development of French in Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I won't take any lectures from a party that still refuses to agree to appointing bilingual Supreme Court judges. We have always done everything we need to defend the French fact in this country, including, as we've said, in Quebec. We know that it's essential to ensure that French flourishes across the country. We also need to be working in partnership with the government of Quebec to protect French in the province. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the member for Saint-Laurent was very contemptuous towards francophones. No one denounced her, none of the French Liberal members. No action. After 5 years, no action on official languages. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister table the Official Languages Modernization Act before Christmas, yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition wants to show his commitment to French, will he commit today to appointing bilingual judges to the Supreme Court? This is an issue, something that he didn't want to do. We'll see if they'll change their mind. We will always be there to defend the French language, to defend the French fact in Canada. That's why we regret the comments made by the member for Saint-Laurent, and she has apologized for those remarks. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The government has never spoken so much about French since the Quebec Act of 1773. In recent days and weeks, we have showcased the huge gap that separates Quebec from Canada, the Quebec values from the government values, language, culture, secularism. Let's clarify things for journalists who are watching us today. Is the Prime Minister acknowledge that the Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, we have always been here for French in Canada. As a member of Parliament from Montreal, as a Montrealer myself, I'm concerned about the fact that there are people who can't be served in French in Montreal. That is unacceptable. That's why we're going to continue to work to defend the French language. We will continue to be working alongside Quebecers to defend our language, culture, and identity, but also on the environment, on economic growth, on a federal government that is always there for Quebecers during the pandemic. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. It won't take long. We'll get him to come out with the words Bill 101 after having commented, disavowed the member for Saint-Laurent today and the member of Heritage yesterday, who said out loud what a lot of Liberals are thinking, to such an extent that we think they must be reading Bill 101 on their bedside tables. We assume that the Prime Minister has spoken to the member for Saint-Laurent. Do they both agree, then, that French is threatened in Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. People must wonder why the Bloc Québécois focuses on this subject so much. We agree we have to continue to protect the French fact in Canada and in Quebec because there is a real danger and a decline. Why are they looking for or trying to pick a fight on something we agree on? Because they don't want to acknowledge and recognize that the federal government is there to help Quebecers with the CERB, with assistance for small business, to fight the pandemic alongside the Quebec government, which is something that they see as very bad. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honestly, things are going very badly. There are outbreaks across the country. The situation in Quebec is serious. People are afraid, families are afraid, but we knew all of that. We knew that the second wave of COVID-19 was going to hit hard. But we've got less support for people than under the first wave. In the NDP, we're prepared to work together to help people. What is the Liberal government waiting for to take action? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the start of the pandemic, we have taken action to help Canadians, to help families, young people, seniors, to help businesses, small and large businesses, communities. We have sent PPE to the provinces, testing equipment. We've sent billions of dollars to the provinces so that they are ready for the second wave. And we will continue to work along with them. We'll continue to be there for Canadians during the pandemic as long as it lasts. We will be there standing behind them as a federal government.
East South.
Mr. Speaker, crowded homes in Nunavut mean the risk of the outbreak spreading is severe. In Manitoba, outbreaks in long-term care homes means that we are losing seniors. In Ontario, hospitals are being overrun. Yet despite how serious the situation is right now in the second wave, there is less help in place for people than in the first wave. Now, we as New Democrats are ready to work together to get help to people who are in need. What is this government waiting for to act now in the second wave?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have not waited. We are continuing to increase our supports to individuals, to communities, to First Nations, to the North, to provinces. Every step of the way during this pandemic, the federal government made a promise. We would have Canadians' backs. And that's exactly what we've done and what we will continue to do for as long as it takes, whatever it takes. And I look forward to working with all members of this House in order to make sure we're moving forward on getting Canadians the supports they need. Every step of the way, this government will be there for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisker.
Mr. Speaker, we all know the lengths the Prime Minister went to in his attempt to get a seat at the UN Security Council. The money he spent, the political capital he used, the tenacity he showed. The Prime Minister, his ministers, even civil servants were relentless in the campaign for the Prime Minister's vanity seat. Now, it didn't work, but the entire world knew the Prime Minister wanted this. So here's my question. Will the Prime Minister use that same focus, that same determination, and that same zeal in his fight to ensure that Keystone XL, a project that will create thousands of real jobs for Canadians, gets built?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that is a project that I have supported for the past 7 years. I actually went down to Washington, D.C. to speak to a room full of Democrats before I was Prime Minister to talk about how important that project is for Canadian energy security and for American energy security. I will continue to bring that up. We continue to work on it. I brought it up in the conversation with President-elect Biden in our very first conversation. We will continue to work together on fighting climate change, on assuring energy security, and on building a better future for all of our citizens.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisker.
Well, the problem is the Prime Minister has said so many negative things about Canadian oil and gas and done so many things to kill jobs in the Canadian energy sector that nobody believes him or trusts him to do anything to stand up for these jobs in Canada. Conservatives don't trust him, and I promise you, Canadian families and energy workers do not trust this Prime Minister. So will he stand up today and will he guarantee that he is as committed to Keystone XL pipeline and making sure that it gets built as he was to his vanity UN seat?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
See, Mr. Speaker, here's the problem Conservatives face. Anytime someone talks about doing right by the environment or building a greener or cleaner future, they think it's an attack on workers and on the oil sands and on our energy industry, when indeed moving forward on protecting the environment is the best way to ensure jobs and security for our energy workers and our energy industries. We know that international investors and consumers are looking for people with plans, with resolve, and with a lower carbon future. That is what we are working on building right across the country. The energy and the environment and economy go together.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, here's the problem Canadians face. This Prime Minister had a state dinner with President Obama, but Obama canceled Keystone XL, Mr. Speaker. The government is running a whole-of-government campaign to find Bill Morneau a retirement job at the OECD. The Prime Minister toured the world, meeting with despots for his UN Security Council bid, but only one phone call for the thousands of jobs that rely on Keystone XL. So my question is simple. Will the Prime Minister commit today to meet with as many American officials as possible to get this project done, to help Western Canada, to help Canada.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, here's what Conservatives simply don't understand. You cannot get projects built. You cannot move forward to create good jobs for Canadians if you don't have a plan for the environment at the same time. If you are not committing to fight climate change. That's where Conservatives are stuck in decades past ideologies. Canadians know that the only way forward with Americans, with people around the world, is to show real leadership on climate change, the kind of leadership we have shown over the past 5 years. When will they wake up and realize to protect jobs, they need to fight climate change?
The
Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I asked some questions about the government's blind faith in compromised information. It seems that the Liberal government's not very concerned about compromised institutions. Today, Democracy Watch announced that it has filed a court challenge to the government's method of appointing judges that promotes or compromises the impartiality of the courts. The minister has declined to comment. What does this silence say about the transparency of the government? The Honourable Prime Minister. In 2015, we put in place a merit-based process for the appointment of judges. Following years of Conservative favoritism, we put in place a merit-based process based on independent recommendations to appoint judges. Judges who now reflect the diversity of our country, be it geographical diversity, for political perspective as well. It's important to have a judicial system that reflects the diversity of the country. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, the same government received an F from Democracy Watch in May 2019 for transparency. The President of the Canadian Bar Association has called for changes to the judicial selection process to avoid partisan manipulation. The Minister's office refuses to comment because it knows it has a great influence over the process. Will the government consider following the advice and change the judicial selection process? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, I will point out that we put in place a merit-based process. We are looking for high-quality judges from different political backgrounds, different horizons. We have a record number of women we've appointed, members of diverse communities. We are improving the appointment process. We will continue to ensure that high-quality judges are appointed across the country. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Merit-based. The media said that this government is interfering in the appointment of judges. Democracy Watch has said that as well. The Canadian Bar Association has repeated the same thing, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister and his minister are the only ones who disagree. Will the Prime Minister accept that he is interfering in the judicial appointment process? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we put in place a robust, independent, merit-based process that enables us to appoint high-quality justices across the country. The Leader of the Opposition is quoting the media and Democracy Watch, but look what they did when they were in power. We have made improvements to the process that they had botched under Harper. We are improving the situation with respect to diversity on the bench. The Honourable Member for Belley-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister calls the French fact is the national official language of Quebec. All comments and decisions by the Supreme Court and the money by the federal government is being used to challenge and demolish Bill 101. Does the Prime Minister regret having spent Quebec taxpayers' money against French? Does he acknowledge that the Canadian Charter has demolished Bill 101 in the Supreme Court? And does the Prime Minister believe that Bill 101 is oppressive towards Anglophones in Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Court Challenges program is one that we restored after it was cut twice by the Conservatives so that people can defend themselves if their rights are violated, including many Francophones who want to ensure that they can live in their language. It's important for us, and it always will be. With respect to Bill 101, we acknowledge that for Canada to be bilingual, Quebec must be first and foremost Francophone, and that is why we support Bill 101 in what it achieves for Quebec. That is why it's important to manage bilingualism across the country. The Honourable Member for Belley-Chambly. He's going to make the headlines today, Mr. Speaker. The last time we talked about citizenship, the government leader blew a gasket, and he said that the Bloc was trying to divide people based on language, culture, and color. The Prime Minister acknowledges that the French fact is challenged, and all of a sudden he likes Bill 101. Will he encourage his caucus to vote in favor of the legislation being put forth by the Bloc tomorrow that will require knowledge of French to obtain citizenship in Quebec, Canadian citizenship in Quebec? And I'm sure that our Conservative colleagues will be voting in favor of it. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's a bit odd and worrisome to see the Bloc aligning with the Conservatives on the French fact in Quebec and Canada, because the Conservative Party has always been the party that undermined Francophones' rights outside Quebec, that continues to sabotage the French fact by refusing to commit to appoint bilingual French-speaking judges to the Supreme Court. We will always defend the French fact in Canada, the French language, and French entities across the country. This is something that people can count on from the Liberal Party.
For Calgary Nose Hill.
The Prime Minister just said that it would be months and months before a vaccine is available in Canada, so we need to use other tools right now. Yesterday, Anthony Fauci said that Canada must test widely in the community for asymptomatic spreaders in order to stop the spread of COVID. To do this, we need things like at-home tests that people can easily buy and frequently used. And today, the U.S. approved this type of test. When will the Prime Minister allow Canadians to have this life-saving and job-saving tool?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, $25 billion. That is what we've sent to the provinces so they can invest in testing, in contact tracing. We sent that over the summer for vulnerable people, for back to school, to support their health systems. We understand how important it is for the federal government to be there to support Canadians directly and to support the provinces. And I certainly look forward to continuing to work with the provinces on delivering these tests that they need. We delivered rapid testing to all the provinces, and hopefully soon some of the provinces will start deploying those rapid tests that we've delivered to them by the millions.
Well, member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, just to remind the Prime Minister, it's actually his job to approve technologies like at-home tests, which the Americans just approved today. And he might not realize in his rich privilege that people might not be getting tested because of the stigma. If we could have at-home tests that people could use in the privacy of their home frequently, it could be a game changer. It could keep things open. It could keep kids in schools. When will the Prime Minister stop blocking Canadians from having access to at-home tests?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it concerns me that in the middle of a pandemic where health is on everyone's mind, the opposition health critic does not understand that it is not my job to approve tests. It is not the job of the Prime Minister or any politicians to approve tests. It is the job of our professional, independent public servants who we trust to make those jobs. Maybe she thinks it's all about politics. It's not. It's about protecting Canadians and saving lives, and that is what has guided this government every step of the way in this pandemic. Science, not politics, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
understand, Mr. Speaker, is that it's his job to go to the bureaucracy and say, we need both. We need rapid test review. We need to have that sanctity and that thoroughness of review, but we need to have it quickly so that we can save lives. At-home tests should be something that the government is encouraging Health Canada to do a fulsome review in a short period of time so that we can have access to these tests and stop the pandemic in its tracks. That is his job. And it's his lack of ability to get this done that's preventing Canadians from having access to these tools. Why?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, this government has worked closely with scientists, with health professionals to ensure that they have the tools to do their jobs, that they can make the best recommendations possible to Canadians. And we have amplified those and ensured that Canadians right across the country, from public health officials to premiers, can make the right decisions to keep people safe. We've said to them, I know you're going to face difficult decisions about whether to shut down quickly or try and stretch it out a little. Well, we've made that job slightly easier by saying we will have your citizens' backs. We will have the businesses' backs. We will give those supports so you can make the decision to shut down quickly. That is what we've been there to do for the provinces, and we will continue to be there to support all Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What concerns me, Mr. Speaker, is the arrogance of this Prime Minister. We ask questions hoping for a better response from this government. Science above politics, Mr. Speaker. A year ago, they shut down the early warning pandemic system to focus on vaping, a system that for 20 years protected Canada from an outbreak like this. For 20 years, scientists were tasked to rely on their own intelligence, not on China, Mr. Speaker. So, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, if we're bothering the Prime Minister with these questions, we want to save lives, we want to save our economy.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I am sure that I didn't just hear the Leader of the Opposition say that because of something we did last year, Canadians are now facing a pandemic. The level of political attacks there that they're actually tossing out is irresponsible in a time where Canadians are looking to government and to political leaders to pull together. And that's exactly what we've done. We have been working hand in glove with the provincial governments. We've been working with local health authorities. We've been ensuring that Indigenous communities get the supports they need. We've been working directly with Canadians. We will continue to have Canadians' backs every step of the way.
Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
This government has refused to be transparent about the vaccine deals they've signed with drug makers or their plans to deliver COVID vaccines to Canadians. Just today, we learned from the Ontario Health Minister that 6 million doses of vaccine will apparently be delivered to Canada between January and March, with almost half for Ontario alone. This is just a fraction of the doses the Prime Minister claims he has secured. Why are we hearing national vaccine plans from a province? And when will this Prime Minister reveal full vaccine distribution details for Canada?
Prime Minister.
Speaker, from this summer onwards, we've worked extremely hard to sign deals with as many different vaccine producers, potential vaccine producers, as possible around the world. And as a result of it, Canada has the strongest portfolio of potential vaccines of any of our peer countries, because we've been there to support Canadians. And we know that getting those vaccines out to Canadians across the country is going to be a significant challenge, because there are so many different types of vaccines and so many Canadians who need to get them. But as we have every step of the way, we will be there to deliver for Canadians to get us through this pandemic.
The Honourable Member for North Island Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, Lisi Kahaksik came to Ottawa from Nunavut to treat a broken pelvis. In the hospital here, she was denied water and staff refused to change her diaper. She called 911 and emergency services brought water to her room. This strong Indigenous woman said, "We're done. We're not going to be treated like this anymore." First Nations and Inuit health is a federal responsibility. And this is another example of the racism Indigenous people face in the healthcare system. Indigenous people are done with racism, Mr. Speaker. When will the Liberals be?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, systemic racism against Indigenous peoples, or against racialized Canadians continues and is something that this government is committed to fighting against. We made a commitment and are moving forward on distinctions-based health legislation that will ensure that we are doing a better job of supporting Indigenous peoples through their health challenges. We will continue to work hand in hand with them and ensure that through provincial systems as well, there is better treatment for Indigenous peoples. We have a lot of work to do, but this government is committed to doing it, and we will continue to do exactly that.
The Honourable Member for Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, today Brampton got its fair share. This morning, the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities announced that my community of Brampton South will receive almost $39 million from our government towards the transformative downtown Riverwalk project. It is expected that this will create 23,000 jobs and impact the local GDP to the tune of $1.4 billion. Can our Prime Minister tell us how local sustainable infrastructure projects like Brampton's Riverwalk will play a part in Canada's economic recovery?
Honourable Prime Minister.
I want to thank the member for Brampton South for her question and for her tireless advocacy for her community. Climate change and the severe weather it can bring has increased the risk of flooding in Canada. We're committed to helping communities overcome these new challenges. That's why we announced improvements for the Downtown Brampton Flood Protection Project. It'll reduce the risk of flooding for hundreds of families across the downtown core while attracting new investment to the city and creating good jobs for the future.
The Honourable Member for Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, recently at Justice Committee, we heard moving testimony from individuals in the persons with disability community who are gravely concerned about this government's Bill C-7 and the impact on their community. Krista Carr, Executive Vice President of Inclusion Canada, said that if Bill C-7 passes, discrimination on the basis of disability would once again be entrenched in Canadian law. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing? Listen to the voices of Canadians living with disabilities and support our amendments that would reinstate safeguards to protect vulnerable Canadians.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, from the very beginning, we've worked closely with advocates within the disability community to hear their concerns and to look at how we can get the balance right. We know how important it is to move forward with a medical assistance in dying bill that is constitutional, that both maintains and protects people's rights while at the same time protecting the most vulnerable. It's something we did as we moved forward a number of years ago. We're continuing to move forward while listening to people to try and get a very difficult balance right, but Canadians deserve us to get this right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister is listening, he's heard from physicians who've referred to Bill C-7 as a massive failure of compassion. He might have heard from disability advocates from across the country who've raised alarm that the bill goes too far and devalues their lives. One of the witnesses at committee said that she believed all her doctor saw when looking at her was a woman alone, sick, tired, and probably tired of living. So let's get the balance right, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Prime Minister rushing this bill when so many people fear the vulnerable will be impacted? Can he listen and have amendments that will protect society's most vulnerable?
Honourable Prime Minister.
The member opposite well knows that the courts have ruled on this, that there are pressures and there are questions from many different Canadians on all sides of us wanting to get this bill right and being able to move it forward. We continue to work as government should, and indeed as a parliament should, listening to different perspectives, trying to get that balance right, because we know what we need to do is ensure that all Canadians' rights are protected while at the same time we protect the most vulnerable. As this parliament has in the past, I look forward to good, robust conversations as we work to get something very important just right for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister stated he thought a trade agreement with the United Kingdom was an easy one to move on, then blamed delays on the UK lacking bandwidth. UK representatives have denied this claim. The Prime Minister patronized one of our most trusted allies. The government has had years to work on this agreement, and now there are only 23 more sitting days of Parliament in order to make this happen. When is the Prime Minister going to be bringing an agreement to Parliament?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's been many years that we have been working on moving forward on a seamless transition for the UK following its Brexit to ensure that the trade relationship between Canada and the United Kingdom continues on the same rhythm. We are hopeful that we are going to be able to get to an agreement very soon because indeed we know that that transition to Brexit is happening in a matter of weeks. We continue to work to ensure protection for Canadian companies, access for Canadian consumers, and certainty for our UK friends.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this government spent 5 years chasing a free trade agreement with communist China until the foreign minister just recently gave up this summer. But with our oldest ally, the United Kingdom, this government has been missing for 18 months. Yesterday, in the United Kingdom's House of Commons, Mr. Speaker, a minister for the British government suggested that our Prime Minister's statements shouldn't be taken seriously. Mr. Speaker, it's taken them 5 years to realize what we've known from day one. So will the Prime Minister today commit to having a Canada-UK free trade agreement completed and presented to Parliament by the end of the year?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, we're working extremely hard with the UK on ensuring that they get a seamless transition. They chose to leave the CETA, the European Union agreement with Canada. We look forward to seeing that roll over in a seamless transition, but it is really entirely up to the UK to get that done. We are there to sign it, and we are very hopeful that we will be able to move forward shortly, but we respect the sovereignty of the UK and its ability to make its own decisions.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, a company called Proline Advantage got a $371 million sole source contract for medical gowns. The problem? They don't make medical gowns. FTI got a $237 million untendered contract for medical ventilators. The problem? They don't make any. This summer, We Charity got a $900 million sole source contract to invent a bursary program. Why is it so easy to get untendered contracts from this government for hundreds of millions of dollars for services you don't even provide? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the start of the pandemic, we've seen Canadians, we've helped Canadians, and creators and producers, we've seen them come forward to pitch in and help out. They've switched to producing PPE. They've developed solutions here in Canada. They took up the challenge, and we no longer have a PPE crisis. We're very proud of the efforts all Canadians have made, and we will continue to work to ensure that all Canadians are protected. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, last month the government insisted on creating a special committee to examine all COVID-related spending. We've since learned that $371 million was spent on medical gowns at double the price to a sole proprietorship who sells protein shakes in his basement, not medical equipment. And the $237 million, overpriced by $100 million, went to a former Liberal member, Frank Baylis, who sat here in this place as recently as last year. It's funny. Can the Prime Minister explain to us why they're trying to block their own special committee on COVID spending? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I can understand that someone listening to this question period might be very concerned about the fact that we may be sorely lacking personal protection equipment, but I'd like to reassure both the House and all Canadians watching that in recent days, product was delivered to the provinces and territories, over 5 million N95 masks, over 3 million surgical masks, and over 1 million gowns. We will continue to deliver the necessary equipment to the provinces and territories for all Canadians all across the country during this pandemic. The Honourable Member for Richmond North Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, the member for Saint Laurent angered all Canadians when she questioned whether French was in decline in Quebec. And privately, other Liberals are apparently saying they don't think French is all that important. The Prime Minister himself appointed this member to the committee, the Official Languages Committee, and she's lost all credibility, all legitimacy to stay on it. What's he waiting for? Why doesn't he do the right thing and immediately replace her on the Official Languages Committee? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the member apologized for her comments. We will always stand up to defend French and the French fact in Quebec and all across Canada. This government has always been there to defend language minorities. We know how important it is to have a bilingual country, and to have a bilingual country, Quebec has to be above all, first and foremost, Francophone, French-speaking. And that's why we will not be lectured by the Conservative Party, which has always attacked Francophone rights all across the country. The Honourable Member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, but what the Prime Minister has said is disrespectful and not in keeping with reality. The President of the Liberal Party of Canada in Quebec, Ms. Chelsea Craig, said Bill 101 is an oppressive law that has ruined education for Anglophones in Quebec. Dictating that I have to speak French at work is oppressive. Mr. Speaker, it's crazy. This is the Liberal Party of Canada's Quebec president who said that. Will the Prime Minister immediately condemn the disrespectful comments made by his president to Quebecers, yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Liberal Party and the Liberal government will always defend both official languages. I would give my colleague the opportunity to confirm that the Conservative Party in future will only appoint bilingual judges to the Supreme Court. That's the commitment I made as Prime Minister. That's the Liberal Party of Canada's commitment. Yes or no? Will the Conservative Party only appoint bilingual judges to the Supreme Court in the future? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Always defend, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister and his official languages minister are all talk, no action. It's been 5 years now that the Liberals have been in office, and 5 years that they've done nothing for official languages. French is not a priority to this government. Let them table legislation in this place to modernize the Official Languages Act before Christmas. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, a missed opportunity for the Conservatives to defend French. The leader of the Conservative Party stood up in the House to answer my question. My question was, will he undertake to appoint only bilingual judges to the Supreme Court in the future? And he didn't undertake to do that. So let's just agree that the Conservative Party is not the party that's going to defend Francophones and French in Canada. As always, it will always take Liberal governments to do that. The Honourable Member for Miramichi Grand Lake. Mr. Speaker, now more than ever, Canadians need high-speed broadband internet access because more and more people are working and learning from home and accessing important services like telehealth. Can the Prime Minister give us an update on the Universal Broadband Fund and how it's going to improve connectedness for all Canadians? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank the member for Miramichi Grand Lake for his question. He's totally right. Canadians count on the internet to connect with resources and their loved ones. That's why we've announced a $1.75 billion investment to help all Canadians have high-speed access. That will connect some 400,000 more homes to high-speed internet access, especially in rural areas. This is the largest federal investment of the kind, and it will make a real difference in people's lives.
Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, we're reaching epidemic levels of suicide in our country. The Prime Minister's own cabinet have acknowledged that suicide is on the rise and that we're facing a mental health crisis. Last week, the Prime Minister told Canadians who are feeling anxious or overwhelmed to call 211. Again, for the record, 211 is a directory It's not even available in all regions of our country, and it's not a national suicide prevention hotline. Is the Prime Minister comfortable with telling Canadians in crisis to please hold?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we need to be there for Canadians when they need us the most. Canadians deserve access to mental health services regardless of where they live or when they need help. We're having discussions with partners on how we can help more people get the access to the help they need. We're open to having discussions about a consolidated hotline, and we'll work with members of this House on how we can continue to support Canadians through this pandemic and beyond. This pandemic has exposed many challenges in our society that we are going to continue to fix, not just for now, but for the years forward as well.
The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, the U.S. has taken real action on suicide prevention by moving to a 988 National Suicide Prevention Hotline. The Prime Minister has said over and over again in this question period about protecting Canadians and saving lives. So this is a simple question. The time for him to step up is right now, and it's right here. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing, commit to working together in a bipartisan way, and bring 988 to Canada, yes or no?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are committed to working together to figure out how to best serve Canadians suffering from mental health challenges. In the very beginning, in 2015, we brought in record investments to the provinces on mental health. We've continued to work, including during this pandemic, on increasing the funding for Kids Help Phone by $7.5 million, by reaching out to the United Way to help them provide more services. But we're always happy to do more, and I look forward to working with the honourable member on this issue and making sure we're getting the very best help to Canadians that we possibly can.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there are rare occasions where I agree with the Prime Minister. We do need to be there. We all know that mental health issues have been aggravated by COVID-19. We all know that a single point of contact for those in need in their darkest hours will save lives. Isolation has already been a death sentence for too many. All MPs in the House know members of their family, their communities, and even their political families who've been struggling. So we have an opportunity to work together for the mental health and well-being of all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join our effort to have a 988 hotline national by Christmas?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've made many investments in mental health. We've made many investments in programs that offer supports from Kids Help Phone to the United Way to others. We are happy to work with all members of this House on something, yes, indeed, we can all agree on. We need better supports, and we look forward to working with members to figure out exactly what that is and how we can get it delivered to Canadians.
The honourable member for Beaches East York.
Mr. Speaker, as Canadians, we take our digital privacy seriously, and there's been good reason for increasing concerns about how that data and personal information is being collected and used. In a fast-moving digital world, we need both strong privacy and digital rights and a strong regulator to enforce them. Can the Prime Minister tell my constituents and all Canadians how our government plans to modernize and strengthen Canada's digital privacy laws?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Beaches East York for his question and for his tireless advocacy on this important file. To be competitive and to recover from the effects of this pandemic, our economy must harness the power of data, while at the same time protecting the privacy of Canadians. Canadians deserve more control and greater transparency over how companies handle their personal information. This is why we are proud to introduce the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, which will establish Canada as a global leader in protecting digital privacy.
The honourable member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit hard, but it's not hitting everyone in the same way. Women, young people, and racialized people are harder hit than others. Women in the workplace have lost ground, and the unemployment rate for young people is around 20%. In some racialized communities, it's up to 30%.
We have a point of order for the honourable.
The translation volume at the same volume that the honourable member is speaking of.
Okay, peut-être je pourrais demander.
Perhaps I could ask the member to see whether he's on the right channel. Has he selected French as his channel?
S'il vous plaît, recommencez.
Please start over, and we'll make sure that the translation is working. Fine. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic is hitting everyone. It's hitting hard, but some segments of the population are more affected than others. Women, young people, and racialized people are experiencing harder effects. The place of women in the workplace women have lost ground. The unemployment rate for young people is up to 20%, and in some racialized communities, up to 30%. What is the government doing to help those young people, to make sure that they regain trust and hope for the future? The Honourable Prime Minister, I'd like to thank the member for his question. That's something we're also concerned about, very concerned. The pandemic is indeed, like any crisis, affecting the most vulnerable more than others. And that's why we've been there since the outset to help women and young people and minority communities. We will continue to look for ways to help, and I'd like to thank all members who are pitching in and pointing out that more needs to be done for certain communities. We will be there and continue to invest to make sure everyone gets through this crisis and create a better world afterwards.